We'll start in just a few minutes. Yay, looks like we're getting some people on. Hang on just a minute. Turn the video off. I can hear it. All right. Oops. Gonna give it a couple minutes, let everybody get on, and we'll get started here in a few minutes. All right. If you're watching, go ahead and post hello. Tell me where you're from. It's interesting how far some of these posts actually get. All right. I hope we're not the only ones watching the video. If not, I think people will watch it later. This is our first time doing a live class kind of thing. So, all right, I will go ahead and get started. My name is Jessica, and I am one of the owners of Forever Growing LLP. One of the things that we wanted to do when I first started spinning was to be able to kind of investigate a new hobby, to look at it and really kind of understand it before making a huge investment. For us, that turned into 3D printing spinning wheels. However, at its very core, I want spinning to be affordable for everyone. And so I hope that you enjoy this short class. If you have any questions while this is going, please feel free to comment with your questions, and I will try to answer them as they come up. All right. So let's start with some of the basics. When you're spinning, so spinning is the process of taking fiber and turning it into string or yarn. So I'm going to show you some examples of fiber. This is mohair. This comes from a goat. So this is goat fur. This one is alpaca. So this is alpaca fur. And this one is wool. This one is a mix of the mohair and the wool. And then this one is also just the mohair by itself. So if you notice, some of this is curly Some of this is, different colors, and it all has different textures. If you are first starting out, you can even use pet fur, that you've brushed off your dog and things like that. But if you really want to have good quality results, you want to have good fiber to start with. This is probably the best that you could purchase here, and this is a pre-made roving. And so what this does is someone has already gone through and prepared these fibers for you. And so what they call, there's some qualities of fiber that you want to look for, especially if you're purchasing fiber. And one is what they call vegetable matter. So can you see those brown bits of stuff in there? I've left some really big ones in here so you could see. Any kind of fiber that you buy was once on an animal. And so it's going to have bits and pieces of fluff. And, for example, if you were using, say, pet hair, this I brushed off my dog, you can see that, yes, everything he's come into contact with is stuck in his hair, and it's no different for sheep or goats. So this raw fiber from your pet is probably going to be the most economical option for you. There are plant fibers that you can also use for spinning. So one of the things that I like to do is to talk a little bit about the tools that you would need to process this fiber. There are lots of good instructions for washing fiber, but the bottom line is warm water, soak it, and rinse it. You can use a variety of shampoo type soaps. They also sell specifically soaps for scouring, like unicorn scour or kookaburra wool scour, things like that. But the general idea is that you want the fiber to be clean. You don't want it to be sticky. And you want it to kind of feel like your hair after you wash it. Okay. So now you have this fiber that you've either purchased from somebody and it's pre-made into roving for you, or maybe you've purchased a bat, and a bat is prepared fiber, but it looks kind of like a blanket with the different colors. Or you may have purchased raw fiber and you need to process it. So if you've purchased the raw fiber and you need to process it, you've got a couple of different options, but you will need some tools. Ideally, you want to have a good set of carders. Now, these are not cheap. Even used, they can run $40 to $60. But what you're looking for in carders, and this is a very old set, so you will see some issues with these carders. These little teeth here, let's see, there we go. There's some of the little teeth. They look like little metal spikes. This is my dog brush. So there's a lot of similarities between the metal spikes on the dog brush and the metal spikes on the carders. Sometimes you can get lucky and find a little dog brush at one of the dollar stores, and you'll need two of them. Okay? So the idea in general for carding, whether you're using dog brushes, whether you're using hand carders, is you want to line those fibers up all in the same direction. So for example, here's my mohair. I'm going to take the mohair and I'm going to kind of pull it across one of the carders. And what I'm doing here is I am making the fibers kind of go all in the same direction. But when I take this one and I pull down gently, it starts pulling off in little pieces those fibers and lining them up. And so if you looked at the beginning, it was very kind of multi-directional on those fibers. Now they're pretty much lined up. They're all going in the same direction. So for a little contrast, I'm going to put some alpaca on here. The longer the fiber, usually the easier it is to spin and work with. Now, this alpaca has a really long fiber length. There we go. And so you can card that out as well. A little word about what they call staple length. So when you're spinning, essentially what you're going to be doing is you're going to be pulling these fibers apart and trying to line them up so that they kind of overlap. And you're just going to be tugging little pieces and pieces out of your kind of glob of fiber in your hand. And there's this thing called staple length, and staple length refers to the length of the fiber that you are using. So if I take this fiber and I pinch it in two places and I gently start to pull it apart, those fibers slide apart and eventually they're no longer touching. And so if you pull out just a few hairs, this one has a staple length from this hand to this hand, and I'd say that's about 3 inches. A 3-inch staple length is pretty common, pretty standard to work with. Now, like with this alpaca, if I do the same thing and I pull that staple out, this is a little bit longer. It's a little closer to maybe 4 inches. And then here is my mohair. It's a little felted at the end, but that is about a 4 or 5-inch staple length. And the longer the fiber, the more you can pull it apart and it still has enough grippy to reach each other. So you want to get your fiber to a point where, I'm going to pull this off the carder so you can see it, where when you have a bunch of it in your hand, that you can pull little pieces off of it into kind of a string, or what they call a roving. Okay, so you can see it kind of stays together. All those little fibers are gripping each other. And what we're going to do with that drop spindle is we're going to twist these together so that they don't come apart, but more on that later. So I hope that I have answered your questions regarding fiber. Okay. And then we'll talk a little bit about making a drop spindle. All right, so you are going to need a dowel rod. This is I think it's a 1/2-inch dowel rod. Got it at the hardware store. I cut about a 1 foot piece or so. Doesn't need to be exact. My first one that I ever made was a piece of one of those like flag poles that you put in your garden, but the flag had fallen off. So it just needs to be like round, pretty sturdy, and fairly lightweight. The other thing that you're going to want is some eye hooks. Now you want the ones that are actually hooks. So there's the hook, and it has the little screw on the end so that you can put it in the wood. All right, so I'm going to take my dowel and I'm going to pick one end of it, and I'm going to take a nail or something pointy, and I'm going to kind of give that eye hook a place to start. So all I'm doing is putting a little kind of starter hole in the end of that wood. And then I'm going to take my eye hook and screw it into the dowel rod. Now, if you get stuck, like see there's that little piece that's not quite all the way in the wood, you can take a nail or a screwdriver and kind of use it as like a handle to help get that all the way in there. Okay. Now, the next thing that you're going to need is kind of a round piece because what you're going to be doing is spinning this stick, and it's kind of like when you're on the merry-go-round. You've got some centrifugal force, and you need something for that to help you work with. So I'm using a sour cream lid, and this is my 1/2-inch dowel. This is going to be a pretty good sized drop spindle. We could go a little smaller, maybe. There's a different lid. So these are, you know, that drawer that you have in your kitchen somewhere that is full of little plastic containers. Well, I always have like this many lids and maybe one container. So any of these that are up for grabs are fair game. I find that having it a little flexible helps, just with putting it together. This could be a disc of wood. It could be something cool. I've seen people make these out of resin. So the sky is totally the limit as to what you want to do. But for now, we'll start with this. I have a little razor knife. I'm going to cut an X in the top of the lid here. So I don't have anything to cut on. Let me fix this here. There, now I have something to cut on. Just going to cut an X in the lid. Aha, thank you. There we go, cutting an X in the lid. And you want it to kind of look like a soft drink top. So there's our little X. And then we get to do some choices. And you may want to play around with this and see what you come up with. But I'm going to basically poke the stick through the lid. Now this isn't terribly stable. You do want this eventually to stay in place, but here's where you have to make a decision. You can have a top whorl spindle, so the spinning here will be at the top and the disc will be at the top. You can have a bottom whorl spindle. Some people say that the bottom whorl spindles spin longer, spin faster, things like that. I think the top whorl spindles spin better. You can make up your own mind on that. But either way, you pick a spot where you want your spindle to live. Okay? And then we've got to get it to stay in place. So you can use duct tape, you can use masking tape, you can use electrical tape, whatever you might need. Hey Tim, I'm gonna need a piece of yarn. I forgot to grab a piece of yarn. A piece of yarn. Grab a yarn ball off the piano. All right. Thank you. So I am pulling off some strips here of tape. I'm going to get probably 4 of them to start with. So I've got 4 pieces of tape, and I am going to be taping this basically from the lid up the side of the spindle. And I will do that again on this side. And this side. And this side. And it's perfectly okay to be kind of a little kid and go crazy with the tape. No harm done there. But for a little added strength, I'm going to wrap the tape around the top just so it doesn't go anywhere. There we go. Okay, here we go. So that's kind of got that where that lid really isn't going anywhere. It might tip side to side. So you have essentially made a drop spindle. There's a couple things that you're going to want to have pre-made. Having a piece of string already made is a good way to kind of start and learn. So what we will do for the drop spindle is I'm going to tie the yarn under the disc. So this is where I start my yarn. It comes around this top piece, and then I kind of wrap it around the hook. So you can see it dangling by the hook, and you can see it's already starting to spin. So from here, what you need to do is practice spinning. So it helps on these to stand up. So I'm going to be doing it from here, but for now, we'll start here. Start with the spin. So you want to always spin it in the right direction, or in the same direction. There's no right direction. So spinning it like this, and it'll spin the other direction too once it's wound properly. So sometimes what people do is they will spin it, catch it, pinch it in between your knees, and then you're going to be working that twist that's happening in your yarn all the way up through your fiber. When it looks kind of like yarn, you're then going to wrap it around the base of the spindle, and I'll show you this with real fiber, not just the yarn. But for practice, it's good to kind of start with a piece of string so that you have something to kind of wind up and start. Okay, so now I've got it wrapped around the hook so that it's not loose, so that I can actually dangle this by that piece of string. And I'm going to put this down for a minute. The next part that we're going to do is called pre-drafting the fiber. Okay, so I'm going to use my bat. Here we go. And from this bat, I'm going to just find an edge, because they've already lined up all these fibers for me. And I'm going to try to pull off one long piece. Here we go. Here is one long piece. And by hand, I'm going to start kind of twisting these fibers into a point. There we go. From that point, if I pull it out, I can watch the other fibers twist. I'm going to twist them some more, and then pull it out some more. Okay. Now I have kind of this little piece of pseudo string. It's called a single. So I have this one little piece of string. It's still attached to my big lump of fiber. And I'm going to literally tie this new string to the old string on the drop spindle. Okay. So now, when my hook is properly hooked on the spindle, I can give the spindle a spin, and it's spinning the fiber all the way up to my hand. When it looks like yarn, I can bring this around, wind it up underneath of my little dish there, and now I'm no longer spinning with my pre-made yarn. I'm spinning with the yarn I just made. So the idea behind a drop spindle is that as you're pulling this out here, this is spinning. And you will have to experiment to get it to where it spins in the direction that you want. But as you see, as I'm pulling this, this is still spinning. Now let's see if I can get a good camera angle. I may have to do this shorter. So wrap it up, catch it, spin it, oops, see now it's going back the other direction. Spin it, when you pull the fiber out loose, let go and it'll spin all the way up to the hand. Spin it again, pull the fiber, let go, and it has turned my fluff into a single. I'm going to wrap this around. Now, sometimes what happens when you're doing this is you'll pull it too much and the fiber kind of separates. Oops, like that. That's the reason they call it a drop spindle. So what you end up with is this fluffy bit on the end that's not connected to anything and it's kind of weak. So give it a good spin, twist it up pretty tight. There we go. And this is where you need 3 hands, of course, but you want to lay your fiber on top of your already spun yarn with some twist in it, and you want to try to get the new fiber to kind of connect to the old. So give it some spin, pull it down, and it starts twisting itself together. Heavier spindles make skinnier yarn, and lighter spindles make lighter yarn, because if your spindle is too heavy, it's just going to keep pulling that string. Okay, there we go. All right, so that is the basics of using a drop spindle. All right, well, I don't see any questions up here, but I believe that is all that I have. It doesn't take a whole lot to get started in spinning. I do believe that you can do this for less than $20, including this class. Once you have experimented with spinning and determined that you like it, because I find this fascinating, it's very relaxing, it's very sensory. So, you know, make up your mind. If you do want to experiment with it, this is an affordable way to start. Once you've mastered the drop spindle, you should fully understand the mechanics of spinning. Then you can choose to upgrade perhaps to a traditional wheel or an electric spinning wheel, both of which will, you know, make beautiful yarn. You can make beautiful yarn in the drop spindle too. This is one of the oldest technologies in the world. It is a lot of fun, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have. Feel free to reach out to me. Thank you. Happy spinning.